What is going on, everybody? Hope you're having a good week. So I just want to thank you for the support for the last video of the Steam Deck Power Saver and Performance Guide. It's good to know there's at least one series on this channel that's going to continue regardless of other videos. And welcome to Volume 2. You know, doing these videos is helping me see the Steam Deck's value and longevity. For the most part. I usually tinker with games and settings for myself, but I usually do it to see how much aesthetic I can get out of the game. Almost like counting your sneaker collection. It's honestly just a random petty thing, but since making these videos, I'm primarily looking for the best battery, life, and efficiency for more than just myself. And it's helping to naturally get more out of the Steam Deck, while playing with friends or just when I have a good chunk of time to kill. Last time I traveled with the device, the entire trip, I didn't use a power bank once. With the deck lasting an impressive 5 hours, I still had an hour of battery life left after playing that party game. And to me, that's Switch-like battery life. Besides that, it seems more people own Steam Decks this year than last. So aside from my own benefit, it seems these types of videos are benefiting more people than ever, and seeing the comment section how some people don't even mess with TDP, I'd assume keeping this series going would be a good thing. And in this volume, at some point, I'm going to compare performance and battery using the JSOX cooling fan attached. The fan seems to help the Steam Deck's internal fan to quiet down, boosting performance and lowering the Steam Deck's overall temperatures. So in a way, it does help with some battery life and performance. And I feel like I don't see enough talk about the JSOX cooling fan and how beneficial it actually is to not only portable performance, but docked as well. I'm only going to cover the portable aspect of that today, and this would enable more tests, but potentially less games each video, because I'm testing a game twice, essentially. And just for information's sake, all of the games tested in this video have the allow tearing option enabled for lower latency. And since you don't really see it on the Steam Deck for some reason. I think because the tearing is horizontal, so it's barely noticeable. At the FPS every game is set to on this list. And lastly, before starting this list, if you are getting stutters, going to the launch options in your game settings and typing up this exact code in all caps DXVK_ASYNC equals 1 space %command %, will ultimately help decrease stuttering for more demanding games with heavy shader cache. And also having the brightness low to mid will earn you an extra 10 to 15 minutes with these titles. And lastly, disabling Wi-Fi does increase battery life by an extra 4 to 10 minutes, so keep that in mind. So the first game on this list is Sonic Generations. I managed to get 3 hours and 50 minutes out of it, so almost 4 hours. I kept the TDP to 5 watts, the resolution to 720p, mainly because this is a fast-paced game and you want to be able to see all of the moving parts, and it's running at 45 hertz because again, it is a fast-paced game, so you want to be able to have better reaction time, and 45 hertz seems to be the sweet spot. And I left this game at high settings because putting it at medium just adds 5 minutes and it sort of makes everything look jagged and slightly blurrier at 720p, and I felt like that sacrifice wasn't worth it for the extra 5 minutes. The next game on the list is Batman Arkham Asylum. I got a solid 5 hours out of this by setting the TDP to 4 watts, resolution to 720p, and the FPS to 40 hertz. I kept the settings usually at medium to high because if Batman Arkham Asylum is known for anything, it's for its aesthetic, and the combat isn't as fast as Arkham City. So the 40 hertz in this case is just as beneficial as 60. And the next game is one of my favorites, Dead or Alive 5. I managed to get that to 5 hours and 45 minutes. For some reason it was fluctuating from 5 hours to 5 hours and 45 minutes, depending how busy the fight was. But I tested it out, I nearly got 6 hours on this title, and I set the TDP to 4 watts, surprisingly. Resolution is at 720p, and the game is at 60 hertz because setting it to a lower FPS will slow the game down, so you're kind of forced to do 60 hertz. But the game almost lasts 6 hours, so you're not losing anything. I kept the graphic settings to high, and this is an unsupported game on SteamOS, so I had to upgrade to Proton GE 7-14, and I found that one works best after trying the others. And essentially, in order to get Proton GE, you'll need to go to desktop mode, to the Discover app, and search Proton Up-QT, and it'll essentially give you options to download different types of custom Proton versions. You'll see the GE option and just select 7-14, and it'll give you the option to download. When you download this, it'll automatically appear on the Steam app, and in gaming mode, you simply have to click on gaming mode so you can go back to it. And when starting Dead or Alive 5, all you have to do is go to compatibility and select Proton GE 7-14 and then start the game, and it should work perfectly fine. There are some customizations you need to add for the controller, but it's just minor. The game pretty much works right from the start as long as you enable Proton GE 7-14. So the next game on the list is Dragon Ball FighterZ. I managed to get 5 hours out of it, and for some reason this game makes a lot of sacrifices in terms of power and performance. So I had to set the TDP to 4 watts, which is almost the minimum, but the resolution was set to 1024 by 576 with FSR enabled, and that is the Steam Deck's internal FSR. I left the FPS at 60 Hz because Dragon Ball FighterZ is an extremely fast-paced fighting game, so you'll just be losing a lot of opportunities if you have it any lower. And I think the game actually slows down just like Dead or Alive 5 if you put it to any FPS lower than 60. I left the graphic settings at high, and for Dragon Ball FighterZ I use Proton GE 7-41. I found that to work the best with it, and I already gave you the tutorial on how to get Proton GE, so just follow that. Now the next title is a popular one, and it's something you shouldn't be too surprised at its battery life, and that's GTA San Andreas. I got 5 hours and 30 minutes out of it. I set the TDP to 3 watts and the resolution to 1152 by 720 with 40 Hz mode enabled, and the graphic settings was left at very high, and I still managed to get that amount of battery. Now I used to play this game on my Nvidia Shield, and I got about 2 hours and 30 minutes out of it, so this is a lot more impressive. Surprisingly, San Andreas isn't much of a pushover in terms of power and efficiency. I had to mess with these settings a little bit to find a sweet spot, and 40 Hz seemed to be that point. Alright, the next game on the list is Just Cause 2. I actually managed to get 5 hours solid in this title. I set the TDP to 4 watts. The resolution is at a custom 928 by 580 with 40 Hz mode enabled because, yet again, this is a fast-paced game and you're going to be looking around all the time, gliding, parachuting, shooting people, and you need that high precision. So 40 Hz surprisingly felt very smooth, just like with the last video with Alan Wake. For some reason, a lot of these older titles feel smoother when you put the game to 40 Hz, and you can manage to trick it into feeling like 60 while still getting that battery life boost. And I left the graphic settings at high, but this game is also not supported on SteamOS. So I set the Proton version to Proton GE 7-27, and once again you'll have to download that in order to get this game to work. But I believe the file is around 700 megabytes, so it's not terrible. And in terms of Proton versions, that's the last game that you need to get a custom Proton version for, so don't worry. The next respective game on this list is Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge, which is the first game on this list that I'm going to test JSOC's cooling fan with as well as without. So without the cooling fan, I got 4 hours and 45 minutes with this title at 45 Hz, and that is amazing because I can only get 4 hours and 30 minutes out of the Nintendo Switch version. And as you know, Razor's Edge on the Steam Deck doesn't fluctuate between different resolutions like the Nintendo Switch version does, nor does it fluctuate with the FPS. And speaking of which, I got 4 hours and 20 minutes on 60 Hz mode. So you'll see a 25-minute differentiator. And I managed this by setting the TDP to 4 watts, surprisingly with either FPS. And the resolution is set at 720p with the settings left at high. Now, with the JSOC's cooling fan, there is a 10-minute increase with the battery life, specifically with the FPS set to 60 Hz. And with the FPS set to 45 Hz, the Steam Deck is able to get more consistent frames with the TDP set to a mere 3 watts, and that's the lowest that you can go. And that managed to get the game to increase to a battery life of 5 hours and 3 minutes. So you got an extra 18-minute increase with the battery life, which is sort of worth it, but your Steam Deck is going to be slightly louder. It's still relatively portable, so it won't bother you that much. And getting more consistent frames with the device being slightly cooler does give you that peace of mind. But yeah, like I said, I'm not going to test the docked mode. If you guys do want a docked mode guide, let me know in the comments and like this video if you want to see that series come to fruition, because I do test the Steam Deck a lot in docked mode as well. And since you got the Ally coming out, that's pretty much going to be my docked mode handheld, it seems. But until then, I can make a guide specific for docked mode, so let me know. And the last game that I tested was, of course, Marvel's Spider-Man, and I managed to get 3 hours out of this game, surprisingly, and that's at a locked, for the most part, 30 FPS. On the other side, I got 2 hours and 10 minutes with 40 Hz mode. For the 30 30 FPS option, I set the TDP to 6 watts with the resolution at 960 by 600. And for 40 Hz mode, I set the TDP to 10 watts with the same resolution. And when the game was set to 30 FPS, the dynamic resolution and upscaling methods was set to off. And the graphics were set to low. Ambient occlusion specifically was set to off because that seems to boost FPS and keep it at a lock 30. With the 40 Hz mode, the upscaling method was set to FSR 2.0 and you have to set that to balanced. The anti-alias was set to TAA, otherwise it just looks horrible. And that's specifically with the 40 Hz mode. And I also tried the JSOX cooling fan with this game. With the cooling fan specifically at medium to high speeds, you earn an extra 5 to 10 minutes of battery life and slightly more consistent frames in 30 FPS and 40 Hz. And just to give you a little perspective, if you have any sort of expectation of battery life in different scenarios, the testing for SpiderMan was primarily during nighttime, which is the most taxing time of day in terms of performance. So expecting better performance and at least 10 extra minutes of game time if you're playing during either the in-game day or evening. But these numbers are reflected for the most demanding in performance time of day, which is night. So you can only see more consistency and better performance, most likely out of your time. Also, for some perspective with the cooling fan, it actually made the device about 4 to 10 degrees colder in every instance. It actually made the device cold to the touch. It was running at about 43 degrees Celsius. And yeah, that's it for this list. Testing all of these games made it clear that the Steam Deck has a lot of power reserved and a lot more potential to be tapped into. And if you want to play any of these games with these settings and specific TDP numbers, you'll be able to play these high-profile AAA titles for a big chunk of your day. And as of recording, the ROG Ally is still on its way, and it's going to be interesting to test that handheld device out to see how it manages against the Steam Deck in terms of power saving and performance. And in case you do past that 3 to 5 hour threshold, if you want to charge the Steam Deck extra fast and you want to match the ROG Ally's charging time, because there seems to be a lot of people that want to match the resolution of the Ally with the Deck HD coming out, I suggest checking out the Insignia 65 watt wall charger. That's the main one that I use. It's sold at your local Best Buy for a reasonable price, and it takes me about an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours, depending if I'm playing it or not, to charge it with that specific charger. And for a little preview of a potential docking guide for the Steam Deck, that being a working title, the cooling fan does take a load off in terms of temperature and performance loads, specifically while playing in 1600 by 900p or sometimes even up to 4K. It makes the performance more consistent because the temperatures fluctuate less. Definitely with more high profile titles, the JSOX cooling fan does help out a lot with those specific titles like Days Gone and Batman Arkham Knight. And this video is not sponsored by JSOX. I just think the cooling fan is an awesome product, which I use daily. So naturally, I'm just recommending it. But it seems like the cooling fan matches the Steam Deck's potential to perform better. And it is a handheld after all, so keeping it cool is important. But yeah, let me know what you guys want to see in the future. And also, if you have any questions about the games in this Volume 2 list, let me know. And with that, I hope you guys have a good one. Thanks for watching. Later.